Good morning, and thank you for joining me once again in this video series. And as you may recall, we're doing the main theme of taking all of the philosophical principles out of Heilkund's medicine, taking them out of the clinic and bringing them out into the world as a whole, or into your life as a whole. So of course, my whole context is medicine. We always start there. But as always, we will end up today in a much broader implication than just some of the nitty-gritty details of healthcare. So let me, let me set up my screen here. And yeah, here we go. So let me just bring up my little notepad. You're probably all getting familiar with my little sticky notes. I'll make that bigger. And the topic today, the title I gave it is Living Soundly, a True Definition of Health. Okay, so hopefully that's pretty clear, but we're going to go into a fair bit of depth on what the concepts are here. And so this whole idea of having a true definition of health, that kind of begs the question of, don't we already have a definition of health? We have this whole healthcare system. We have allopathic medicine, naturopathic medicine, and Heilkunst, and herbs, and massage, and nutrition. And we seem to have everything, don't we? A great, grand, big healthcare system. But let's, if we dig into that a little bit, if we think about it, what we really have is what I would call a sick care system. I didn't invent that word, but I think that's a word that's been around. Any number of people have used it. And in a sick care system, as opposed to a healthcare system, what you end up with is a default definition of health, which is symptom-based. Now, of course, healthcare does need to take into account symptoms. We need to look at the patient and what are their symptoms, what's bothering them. That's, of course, most of the time what brings a patient to my office or to healthcare in general is something is bothering them. They have a symptom, something's not working right, they have a pain, and that's all well and good. This is kind of what drives the healthcare system, or what I'm calling the sick care system, is we don't want sickness. We want to get rid of it. So of course, that's part of it. But what I'm saying, the unfortunate thing is that although this is a necessary part of how we think about health and healthcare, the symptoms, that is, and the sicknesses, that it kind of becomes the default definition. That becomes how healthcare or sick care kind of all centers now around, instead of a true definition of health. Now what we have is this whole world of basing health and the definition of health on symptoms. If you have them, that's not good, and you have to get rid of them. If you don't have them, that becomes the definition of health. It's like, no, I'm fine. I don't have headaches, and I don't have this, and I don't have that. So that just becomes the default definition of health. But that's a very weak, or I would even say a non-definition of health. So anyways, because of this dominant focus on a sick care system, and that happens for a whole variety of reasons, now we end up with a non-definition of health. So let's go into the solution, how we're going to get a better definition, or a proper definition. And we're going to start with two words, and these words are going to weave through how we talk about this, how we're going to define things. The two words are homeostasis and palingenesis. Now, in all probability, you are much more likely to have heard the first word and not likely to have heard the second word. Now, more people who've studied Heilkunst and studied healthcare are more likely to have heard both, but even then, even the second word, palingenesis, is not such a likely word. It's not a very common word in people's everyday vocabulary. So let me give a brief little definition here of each of those words. The homeostasis is, when it comes to health, in particular, it's really referring to, I guess, another synonym or a word we would use is kind of a state of balance, right? Everything is functioning as it's supposed to be. Everything's in a state of balance. We use that word all the time in health. We talk about a balanced lifestyle and a balanced diet, feeling balanced in ourselves. all of these things are referring back to this underlying word or this definition of homeostasis. If something either is in balance, it's functioning as it's supposed to. There's nothing, no stray symptoms or no stray functions that are pushing things off to the left or the right, but we're kind of right in that nice center point of balance. Everything is just ticking along, functioning along just as it's supposed to. So that's all fine. That is part of health. We do need and want that state of balance. And the other word, the palingenesis, is, as I say, the much more unknown word. That is not so much about that state of balance, but it has, and let me back up a step here. The state of balance is kind of this forever state that nothing ever changes. That's kind of the ideal of homeostasis, is that you get everything into this perfect functional state, and then nothing should ever change from that point. If it could stay there forever, that would be, in that world, that would be perfect health. All the heart is pumping the right way and everything is functioning perfectly. And you kind of get this state that you just want to hold on to as it is, right? You just want to kind of, like we say this about our children when they're little, they're that cute age of 4 or 5 or 3 or whatever. We just say, oh, I just want to freeze them right here. Everything is, they're perfect, they're cute, they're doing all these cute things. And if we can only just freeze time right there, that would be kind of the implication of the definition of health, of homeostasis. Now, to go back to our other word now, the palingenesis, rather than being this static state, this permanent state of perfection, or the illusion of perfection, the palingenesis, by definition, is kind of, we kind of think of the mythology of the phoenix. It kind of goes down in a flame, burns up into ashes, but then it's reborn again out of the ashes. So from that image, we get this definition of palingenesis. It's this continual recreation of life. Life is always recreating itself. It's always kind of going into this, this state of complete kind of darkness and destruction, and then it's reborn again. Just think of all the cells in our body. They, none of the cells last forever. They always reach a point of cell death, cytosis, and then this is even in a healthy sense, and then that cell has to be regenerated again. All our blood cells are constantly dying over, I think it's 120 days. Is that the right number? And then, every 120 days, all of our cells will have regenerated themselves. They will have passed away and they will have regenerated. So that's just a physical example, but of course that happens in our psychic life, our emotional life. We are constantly growing and recreating who we are, learning new things, becoming more of what we are, having different relationships, meeting new people, having new experiences. All these things are part of this process of palingenesis, where if we're doing it fully, we do kind of go through a death, or kind of a dark night of the soul at various stages, but hopefully that's part of us staging to come into an even greater fulfillment of who we are. So anyway, so this difference between homeostasis and palingenesis, just kind of hold these two words, hold these two definitions as we continue through this. This is kind of going to be the framework of where we're going. And I'm going to switch over to actually a quote or an excerpt from Dr. Hahneman's Organon. We're going to look at Aphorisms 9 and 10. I just have that open here in my Kindle. And I'll just read them directly. I'll probably be pausing to add my own comments as I go here. They're pretty short sections. Aphorism 9, he says, "In the healthy human state, the spirit-like life force, autocracy, that enlivens the material organism as dynamis, governs without restriction, and keeps all parts of the organism in admirable, harmonious, vital operation, as regards both feelings and functions, so that our indwelling rational spirit can freely avail itself of this living, healthy instrument for the higher purposes of our existence." So it's quite a short little passage there, and it's that even one sentence. Yeah, that's a one of Hahnemann's famous kind of run-on German sentences. But let's just unpack that a little bit. So already within that short long short sentence, we already have some ideas built in there. We have, like I was just showing you, this difference between the homeostasis and the palingenesis. He's kind of expressing this in this difference between the what do we have here? The what enlivens the material organism as dynamis, governs without restriction, and keeps all parts of the organism in admirable, harmonious, vital operation. So that admirable, harmonious, vital operation, that's just another way of saying homeostasis. Everything is ticking along, and things are harmonious. That harmony word kind of speaks to this idea of this beautiful kind of stasis we're striving for. And then what he brings in also, actually, what preceded that, when he talks about the what enlivens the material organism as dynamis, this enlivening, this dynamis, this is kind of what he said, this spirit-like life force that kind of enlivens our being. That's really the part of us that lends itself more to the palingenesis. It's the part that wants to change and develop and evolve, but it has to do this through this entity, through this admirable, harmonious, vital operation. That's kind of this homeostatic harmony, which is kind of making it possible for us to get into that higher form of palingenesis, or that rebirth kind of process. And this other clue here, the higher purposes of our existence, this higher purpose is coming from this kind of higher being, or that you can call it our cosmic being, which comes and incarnates into this earthly form. So that's the being from really where our purpose, our higher spiritual purpose comes from. And I'll go on to this second aphorism, number 10. The material organism, thought of without life force, is capable of no sensibility, no activity, no self-preservation. So the self-preservation would link us back to this homeostasis, and the material organism is kind of what holds that in place. It derives all sensibility and produces its life function solely by means of the immaterial Wesen, that's a German word, the life principle or the life force, that enlivens the material organism in health and in disease. So kind of a clue we can take from this, a little bit of what he's saying here, is that again, between this, the homeostasis on the one side and the palingenesis on the other, if our whole sick care system, as it has, just devolves more to this idea of symptoms and getting rid of them, that's really a focus just on the homeostasis. If a symptom comes along, that is seen as a disturbance of that homeostasis, right? That's kind of the unconscious implication there. So the whole sick care system runs around and it tries all these techniques and drugs and what have you. Even the natural remedies, they make this mistake as well. They run around just kind of chasing symptoms all over the place, trying to get rid of them. But what the unconscious mistake that's being made here is that it is this unconscious, this false understanding, or this false definition of health being about symptoms, being about homeostasis. We kind of miss the real point here. Everything Hahneman is saying here about this immaterial Wesen, what he's calling the life principle or the life force, which infuses our physical body, our purpose, our higher meaning, our higher rational purpose of who we are, that has to infuse and go through this palingenesis process, this process of rebirth, the phoenix dying into a heap of ashes and being reborn out of that again. That's being driven by this higher spiritual purpose of what we are, what we come into in our material body. That's just a vehicle. It's just like the car, we get into to go to drive to the store or whatever. The vehicle isn't us. It's just kind of helping us with our purpose. It's taking us from point A to point B. So likewise, our physical body, our material organism, it's just a vehicle that's carrying us through life so that we actually have a way to unfold this higher purpose, or this palingenesis side of defining health that we've been talking about. So let me go back to my little sticky notes. So that was Hahneman and Aphorism 9 and 10. And what comes out of that is, as well, I find this very illuminating as far as definitions go, that we have a not only the definition of homeostasis and palingenesis, those are very important words. We also get into a distinction that should be much more prominent, but it's not. When we talk about healthcare, especially in natural healthcare, you hear this word all the time, wellness, but what we hardly ever hear is this other word. It's still an English word, the word soundness. We hear that when we talk about drawing up our wills, at the lawyer's office. We talk about, or that famous phrase, being of sound mind and body. Well, why doesn't our will say, being, feeling well? Feeling pretty well today, so I'm going to draw up my will. No, we say we are of sound mind of body. Soundness is a whole different part of defining health than wellness. Wellness goes back to the homeostasis. Everything is functioning as it's supposed to, the heart beating and all the rest of it. That's that homeostatic a sense of stasis. Nothing ever changes. Versus the soundness that speaks more to the higher being that we are, this higher rational being that has a purpose. It is the one that is of sound mind and body. That soundness is that deeper part of health that takes us through the palingenesis and takes us through all the development, all the stages we go through in our life, of course, the trials and tribulations, but the overcoming of those brings out that deeper sense of who we really are and what we're really meant to be bringing into the world. So, and actually, I just remembered something. I almost tapped on my computer screen here instead of my iPad. Back to these words, the homeostasis and the palingenesis. I forgot to mention, I kind of put these little blue dots around part of these words here, the stasis and the genesis. That speaks to some of the words Hahneman uses also in his Organon. The stasis relates to something he calls the substantive power, that's this homeostasis. And the genesis of palingenesis refers to a word that Hahneman uses, which is the generative power. Now, the generative power refers to what I've been talking about with this deeper sense of health, this higher purpose that we incarnate into the world and into our life. That generative power, that root of the word generative is gen, G-E-N. It's the same root as the word genius. So this is kind of another way of pointing to the fact that every one of us, we all kind of have this inner genius within ourselves. Now, of course, there are, history delivers these great geniuses to us, the Hahnemans and the Steiners and the Reichs, all these great medical geniuses or scientific geniuses. They had a big task to bring into the world. So, and if you can spend years and years and years just studying any one of them, that's how much genius they brought into the world. But we all have access to the genius, one of those gen words, generative, genius, genial, that kind of when we describe someone's predisposition as being genial, it doesn't just mean friendly. It means they're tapped into this deeper kind of cosmic side of themselves, that they are tapped into their life's purpose and bringing in this higher meaning, this higher purpose through their individual genius. So anyways, just playing around with these words a little bit, but as we expand out our definition of health, this is some of the kinds of things we will be exploring. We'll go further into this in future videos, but I'm just kind of laying down some tracks here. And to finally kind of bring today to a conclusion, yes, we've been talking about all of this in a strictly health context, but there's much bigger implications for this. So as you take all of this out into your life as a whole, not just the narrow definition of health, but this becomes really a kind of a guiding idea or a guiding principle of how to live our life as a whole. So again, in that health context, when we reduce our whole focus down to just symptoms, that's a very superficial way of looking at what's going on. Of course, as I say, healthcare or sick care gets full of symptoms, but that's unfortunate because it takes us away from the deeper, the depths of our life. Where our core is, where our genius is. The things at the depths. Like anything to do with symptoms is in its worst case scenario is really just a distraction to getting to what our life is really about, what our unfolding is really about, and what we're all driven by our own individual genius, where that is really driving us, through that process of palingenesis, that process of recreation, that process of the generative power, as Hahneman would call it. All of these things, more and more, we want to be coming from the depths of our being, the depths of our lived experience, of our relationships, our experiences. All of these things are really where we want to be driving our life from, and not getting distracted by the symptoms at the surface. Of course, we do want to pay attention to those symptoms, but of course, we want to do so from the depths, from that deeper sense of meaning, and not as something that we're just trying to get rid of as quickly as possible. We're trying to go on a much deeper journey through our life, through our healthcare, through our symptoms, into that depth. So thank you again for joining me with today's video. As I say, I will be continuing some of these themes as we go forward in the future. Wherever you are watching this right now, Facebook, YouTube, whatever different platform, it's all out there. Just keep watching that same channel, and you will be able to continue coming along this journey with me. So thank you again, and have a good rest of the day.